Returning to our top story, nearly 230,000 people have lost their jobs in the month as COVID-19 continues to drag the economy down. Brendan O'Connor is the Shadow Minister for Employment and Industry and he joins me now. Brendan O'Connor, welcome.
Good afternoon, Patricia.
Scott Morrison has warned more Australians will likely lose their jobs after the unemployment rate jumped to 7.1%, and that this is a recession that we shouldn't have had to have. It's a play on words, really, that originally, of course, was used by Paul Keating. That's the case, isn't it? This is a recession that was not of Australia's making. It's a health event.
And our job is to improve, where possible, the government's response. We've worked with the government. There's nothing the government has sought to enact in the parliament in relation to this matter that we haven't voted for. And we'll continue to work with the government, but our job as an opposition is to raise issues around potential deficiencies with the response. And we would say, for example, the 7.1% unemployment rate to which you've referred is really not properly describing the labour market. As we know, if everyone who lost a job between March and May was still looking for work, the unemployment rate, according to the ABS, would be 11.3%. So it is a very significant, difficult situation where we confront. And our job, and what we've proposed, for example, is to say that they need to really outline in more detail what support they'll provide businesses and workers in sectors of the economy that have been compelled to close down for legitimate health reasons. And at the moment, I think people are left wondering what will happen. But if the idea is to move people from JobKeeper to JobSeeker, Patricia, that's really just turning on its head what the Liberal Party has supposedly believed in, which is, we thought, welfare is the best. The fact is, if you want to make sure people are better placed, then of course the best form of welfare is work. What the government seems to be intending to do is to move people from work to welfare,
okay.
And that would be very, very concerning
All right.
to Labor.
So how long do you want JobKeeper to remain in the system?
I think the extent to which you'd lengthen out the time for JobKeeper has to be based on the advice of agencies and Treasury.
On that, the Prime Minister says everything's in the mix and that they will make a determination based on labour conditions as close to the date. So that's why they'll make a determination at the end of July or tell us then. Isn't that reasonable?
Well, I think for businesses that are making decisions about whether they can continue to function and operate and stay afloat, the earlier they're advised about what support they have over the next couple of quarters, the better. And therefore, I think holding off until a by-election and holding off until a statement in July doesn't seem to be necessary, because they'd have sufficient information to know that there are there's more jobs to be lost. And JobSeeker doesn't do what JobKeeper does. JobKeeper supports businesses. JobSeeker doesn't.
Okay, so in terms of what you think should happen, you're not settled on how long JobKeeper should be kept in the system. I know the union movement thinks it should be around 6 months.
Well, certainly I think certainly they should be considering the last quarter of the year, and of course I accept the proposition you need to revise some of these matters, because there are some imponderables in terms of, for example, are you easing restrictions or are you not? When will the internal borders be open? I think these are reasonable, and I therefore accept that the government has to consider these things. But I think it's pretty clear now, with the unemployment really being around 11.3% according to the ABS, if people are still looking for work, that businesses may not last until the end of September if they have no sense that that they're going to be able to be provided support, and that's what worries Labor. JobKeeper, I think, should be certainly not removed. This snap back proposition the government's talked about really is fanciful. No economist is suggesting that the economy will recover in a couple of months, and I think therefore they need to look at JobKeeper and providing wage subsidies, that's subsidies to the labour costs of businesses, and also keeping workers connected to the labour market. That is critical.
Okay, so in certain industries that have recovered, why should they remain on JobKeeper? Don't you think there are some areas where people should be taken off?
I think you can revise the application, but we've always believed that they left too many people out. We're still paying people on JobSeeker, but they've lost. So
you do accept that some people should come off JobKeeper?
Well, I think you could examine the labour market, and in areas where, for example, businesses are not shut down and the impact of the pandemic is not great, then certainly you can recast the way in which you provide support. But ironically, the areas which have been forced to shut down, for example, have the highest proportion of ineligible workers, namely casuals, and therefore they're getting less support. So food, accommodation and tourism have a high proportion of casuals that are ineligible for JobKeeper. So even there are design faults already with the existing arrangements, which I think the government should have attended to. They're not, and now we're worried that they're going to shut it down at the end of September. And that would be devastating for the economy and businesses and workers.
When it comes to job seeker, the unemployment benefit, sometimes these words are tricky, but
Indeed.
The unemployment benefit, do you want it to remain double, and for how long?
Well, again, I think we've always thought that New Start was too low, and we'll certainly await what the government seeks to do in terms of proposing what they might do insofar as changing it. I think it's very hard to return to the levels of New Start. People just were not able to survive properly. So I'd like to hear from the government as to what they propose to do beyond September in terms of
Again, the union movement says it should be left double for another 6 months. What's your view?
Well, again, I would like to hear the government's rationale. Labor hasn't. I'm not convinced that it needs to remain double, but I certainly don't think we can return the amount to the New Start level. And I do think the government, it's incumbent on the government to explain what they want to do there, but we'd like to see some improvement that is a permanent improvement to New Start. Let's
talk about Labor and the issues in the Labor Party. Did you know about the branch stacking? You're a Victorian. Surely you had a hunch?
Well, look, I think branch stacking happens in all parties.
Not like this.
Oh, Malcolm Turnbull was the biggest branch stacker in Australian Parliament history.
Are you really alleging that Malcolm Turnbull was as big a branch stacker as Alex? No, but Alex.
Do you know how many? Do you know how many members? Do you know how many members? Do you know how many members went into that branch? That electorate when Peter King was still the member?
I'm asking you: is
you asked me
the Somyurek allegations? Are you saying honestly here?
No, what I was saying
Malcolm
before
Turnbull...
you interrupted me, Patricia, was that I said that it happens in all political parties. You asked me whether I was aware of it. I know it does happen. Frankly, I was shocked at the scale of the allegations. Insofar as the allegations are concerned, I was shocked at the scale of it.
Did you have a hunch, though, I asked you?
I said I think I'm aware that sometimes people act in contrary to the rules. I was shocked at the scale of the operation according to the allegations that have been made. Look, I've never spoken to Mr Somyurek in my life, for example. I'm not aware of I've not dealt with the person. I was surprised by the scale of the operation according to the allegations that have been made. And I'm very glad that the Labor leader and the Victorian Premier acted swiftly to do what they did. It was correct.
There's a report out this afternoon. Former Andrews Government Minister Adam Somyurek has actually told Nine News that federal Labor MP Anthony Byrne taught him everything he knew about branch work, and says that he's worried for Mr Byrne's mental health.
Well, I'm not sure what you want me to say to that, other than I would be concerned if people are under some pressure. I'm not sure what's the case there.
Well, he's making an allegation about Anthony Byrne's mental health.
Well, I'm not sure what expertise Mr Somyurek has to make such comments, and I'm very sensitive. I mean, on those sorts of issues, I'd be very careful what I would be saying publicly on those things. Again, I've never spoken to Mr Somyurek.
OK, you haven't spoken to him, but he apparently controlled a quarter of votes in Victoria. Isn't that disturbing?
That's the allegation. If in any way that's the case, then of course that's why the National Executive has moved so swiftly to deal with this matter, and I support the decision made by the Victorian Premier, the Labor leader, and indeed the National Executive of the Australian Labor Party.
How did things get so broken in Victoria?
Well, as I say, I think there's an audit now being undertaken. The Labor leader spoke about these issues this morning. We've responded to these matters. It's really now we've appointed Stephen Bracks and Jenny Macklin to assist in dealing with the audit. And until that has happened, I can't even. I mean, there's allegations that are being made. I'm not sure the extent to which those are accurate, but we'll find out more, because I certainly trust Stephen Bracks and Steve Bracks and Jenny Macklin to deal with this matter appropriately.
Labor leader Anthony Albanese says he's counselled backbench MP Anthony Byrne over the content of these dozens of text messages and conversations that have been leaked as what looks like political payback for this link to this anti-corruption inquiry. Shouldn't that have happened earlier? Shouldn't he have reached out to Mr Byrne earlier?
Well, as I said earlier, Anthony has dealt with these matters. He's explained his position, as I understand it. Anthony has made indeed Mr Byrne has made a statement in relation to these matters. I'm not aware of these things until I saw them in the newspapers, and we have set up a process which I think is quite right. We've done so swiftly. The Premier has acted swiftly and decisively, so too has the Federal Labor leader, and I think that's a good thing. And I'd like to see, of course, good come out of this, and therefore it's important that we do the right thing here, and that's what's being done, it appears to me.
If you look at the payback already in these claims by Somurek in relation, or these claims about the mental health of Anthony Byrne, is there a danger that this will become a bigger factional conflict in Victoria that is going to cause, I suppose, disharmony across the party?
Well, I'm not sure we should be discussing the allegations given the sensitivity and the nature of them, Patricia, but of course what I'd like to see is swift action. That's happened, and I'd like to see if there's questions around the eligibility of members of the Victorian branch of the Australian Labor Party, I'd like to see that dealt with. I have no tolerance at all for branch stacking. People know my history, and I want to see an effective, functioning, democratic branch in Victoria doing the right thing, serving the people of Victoria, indeed the nation, and pre-selecting good people and developing good policy. That's what our job is as a political party, and that's what I want to see at the end of this.
Are you embarrassed by what the state of the Labor Party in Victoria?
It's very disappointing.
It's embarrassing, isn't it?
Given the allegations that have been made, I'm very disappointed, but I'm heartened by the fact that there's been such swift action taken, and there's a process set up that's quite transparent to deal with this. And of course, there are other issues that can't be discussed because of other independent inquiries that are being undertaken. But yes, I'm disappointed. I'm glad that we're moving quickly to respond to it.
Thanks so much for joining us.